Hello again, everybody. It's Ryan from Ryan's Guitar Shop. Today I want to share with you what I call the chain method of practicing. This is a method that I use all the time. In fact, I wish I would have learned it way earlier in my guitar practicing, my guitar learning. I didn't learn this till much later how to do this. I was just basically taught to practice the song by my teacher would just say, hey, go home and practice. And my idea was to go ahead and just play a song straight through every day and the whole time. Just start in the beginning, go all the way to the end. It wasn't until much later that I realized and I was taught that I was doing way too much, and it was kind of frustrating. And then as I started teaching middle schoolers, I realized that this is very important to teach them how to practice correctly. So this is what I call the chain method for practicing. I use this almost every time I learn a brand new song, and I teach it to my kids and reinforce that when they learn a brand new song, this is the best way to learn it. Today we're going to use just a simple version of Jingle Bells. Now I'm not here to necessarily teach you the song itself, specifically Jingle Bells, but I'll include a PDF in the description below if you're interested in the song. But I want to use this as an example to show you how I would introduce this to kids. Obviously, I've played this 1,000 times. I already know how to do this, but I want to just kind of introduce this as if I was introducing this to students and get them the idea of breaking up the song into manageable sections or chains and then linking those sections or chains or links together to make a chain. So let's take a look at Jingle Bells here. So this is mostly using the first two strings. Now, again, depending on your playing ability, you might look at this and say, oh, that's pretty easy. But whenever I introduce a brand new song, it's right where my kids need to be, and it's always going to be a little bit more challenging to them. And again, this is for you if you're learning a brand new song for yourself. This can change and vary depending on how difficult the song is. Now, what I usually will do, if it's for myself, what I will do is I will take the song and I'll look at it and I'll determine, okay, this looks, I can usually look at it and say, I can probably play most of this sight reading, or this is going to be more difficult. I need to definitely break this up. But a lot of times what I'll do is I will just take the full song and I will try and play as much as I possibly can. That does give me a good idea of how much or how difficult the song is going to be. Now, again, certain songs and certain sections of songs may be more difficult than others, and so that will always vary as well. But overall, the song has a general difficulty level for every student. So if I take a look at this Jingle Bells, obviously for me, that would be very easy. I would not need to use this chain method for this. But for my students, when they're new, this is kind of daunting for them. They'll kind of be overwhelmed. This is one of the longer songs they get at this point because they've only learned the first two strings of notes on the guitar. So this is pretty big song for them. So at this point, I've already taught them how to do this, but I just kind of reinforce how to do it. Now what I generally do is I'll say, okay, students, I would like you to kind of sight read this on your own or practice on your own first before we do it as a class. And then I just reinforce to them, because I'm teaching 30 some odd kids at a time, I reinforce that they all are going to be at a different level. For example, at this point, some kids may be able to play the first half of the song with very little effort or very little difficulty. Most kids are going to play a line at a time or 4 measures. Some kids are only going to do about 2, and very few maybe only do 1. But at this point, most kids can do more than 1. So the average right now for Jingle Bells for my students at this point would be about 4 measures. So in this case, it works perfectly 1 line at a time of music. Now the idea is if they do that, like, oh, okay, here's line 1, that's not too bad. And then of course, we go ahead and look at line 1, which is here. And then we look at that and say, okay, let's go ahead and start. Well, it's the first string open, 2 measures of that. Now they might get a little tripped up on this part right here. Okay, and then I've already kind of told them or reinforced to them, okay, if those first 2 measures are pretty easy, just work on those last 2. Now this is also a good opportunity for them to go back in their note guides and double check what the actual notes are. Since it's Jingle Bells and they kind of know what it is by ear, they'll probably know when they make a mistake, and they can usually fix that pretty easily. But this is a good time to, again, to reinforce. If you need to, go back and look at a note guide and double check that. So the idea is they play that a couple times, kind of assess where they're at. They're always going to hit those, in this case, those first 2 measures are going to be really easy. And then the measures 3 and 4 are a little bit more difficult. so they can kind of pick and choose with that. I always tell them, just like studying for a test, if they know something and it's easy, skip that part, practice the stuff that needs the most, and then they can come back and put it all together. So the idea is they do a little bit at a time, and they don't have to have it 100%, but I want them to feel fairly comfortable moving before they move forward to the next section. So in this case, then we would look at line 2. Now looking at line 2 is, got a few more notes, but there is a lot of repetition to there. So they might start again playing line 2 entirely. Bunch of first frets, then a bunch of opens. Again, that might be really easy to do, and then a little trickier when they hit this part here. So again, hopefully at this point, we've done this quite a few times at this point, but again, if you're introducing this for the first time, let them know that, again, if they have taken too much, if they've created a link that's too much or too hard to do at once, shorten it down. So maybe it's just the first 2 measures. So they do that. The idea is that you're doing a little bit at a time, one link or one section at a time, and then how the chain method comes in, we take those links and we start linking them together into chain. So that comes to the next step. There's 2 options you can do next. So we've practiced line 1 by itself. We've practiced line 2 by itself. The next option is we have 2 choices we can do. One is go to line 3 and do it all by itself, or we can combine what we've learned already. Now, my personal preference is I like to combine what we've learned already just to kind of reinforce that there's no reason to go on until I've kind of mastered those. So then we go ahead and try lines 1 and 2 together. Now, again, we're not necessarily looking for 100%, but we're just looking for nice, clean playing as possible. A few mistakes might happen, 3, 4, and then we move to line 2. And we might do that a few times as well. But the idea is to, again, master small sections, grow them, combine them, and eventually you'll get through the rest of the song. Now, after we've done lines 1 and 2 a few times, then the next step is we're going to look at line 3. Now, here's the great thing about music and a great thing to me about this chain method. We look at line 3 now, and we notice that like 99% of this is the exact same as line 1. The only thing that changes is this measure here at the end of line 3. The 4th measure of line 3 is a little bit different. Otherwise, it's the same. So again, at this point, once the kids realize that, then they're more than likely, and I've taught them in the past, or at this point, if I'm teaching it to them, I can say, hey, let's go ahead and skip that and maybe just do that 4th measure only. Because that's the only new section. And what you start to see is you start to see the kids realize that these songs with very common have repetition in them. And so it's not uncommon to learn a section of the song and see that section later in the song. And then by pointing that out, hey, you've already learned this. You don't need to necessarily do this right now. Just look at the new section. What that does is it builds their confidence. And, for myself, it builds that, hey, I've already done this. I'm halfway through the song already. And if we know with Jingle Bells, you study, if you do those first 2 lines, then you're halfway through the song and you've pretty much got the song with a few minor changes. So then we might do line 3 just a little bit, especially that last little part, where we've got those extra little notes that differ from line 1, and then we would probably try all 3 lines together. And so forth. We don't need to do that necessarily here. Okay, then the last step that we would go and do is we would look at line 4. Now, if we, again, I already know this, but the kids, when they start playing this, you can kind of see, or I'll point out like, okay, how do line 2 and line 4, are they similar? Oh, well, the first 2 measures of line 4 are the same as the first 2 of line 2. Now, I know it's a little confusing with all the lines and measures here, but you kind of get the idea when you're looking at the whole piece of music. So what we'll say, the kids will say, so I ask them, what do we need to practice? And they're like, oh, we just need to do the last 2 measures of the piece. And most of them by now will be able to play those without much of a problem. So again, the idea with the chain method is to take a song, break it down into manageable sections, practice a little bit at a time, practice it slowly. I didn't really mention that. I know that kind of skipped over that. It's kind of obvious at some point, but make sure you're practicing at a speed that is manageable as well. It doesn't do any good to break it into a small section and, slam through it and make a bunch of mistakes. Practice small little sections, get comfortable with them, not necessarily 100%, because that could take a while. So we don't want to feel like we have to play it 100%. Get it really comfortable, at least in this case, that it's Jingle Bells, that it's recognizable as Jingle Bells. Then go on to the next section. And again, that could be half a song. It could be one line. It could be 2 measures. It could be any sort that you feel like you need to do to be able to, for yourself, to be able to be comfortable, to be able to be successful. And again, build that confidence. And that's all of what we're trying to do, is, especially for middle schoolers, I find they get frustrated very easily. So it's very important that I show them that they can be successful, even if that's only the first 2 measures. And even with that, they're like, oh, okay, I can do that. Okay, then let's take a look at the next 2. And again, this is great for differentiated instruction because I've got 30 some odd kids. All of them are at different levels. And I just try and reinforce to them, like, hey, you do what you need to at this point. If you can do half the song, great. I have maybe 1 or 2 kids that can do the whole song at this point. And then we'll go back and say, okay, well, maybe you didn't do that well, and go back and go from there. So the chain method, let's recap here. Sections, small sections at a time. Practice those individually, then start combining them and eventually work your way through the song, possibly skipping sections that are complete repeats of the previous section of the song and working on those that are essentially new, and then slowly working on chaining the whole song together. Hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.